Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording of Rabbi Avi Havivi's weekly Siddur class.
So we've been studying Rav Soleveitchik on God and prayer. Last week we delved very deeply, read deeply into his passage about tzara, suffering, which he thinks is the principle which kind of prompts and governs the whole middle section of the Amidah, and he talked at great depth about the suffering of the individual who recognizes, when one looks into one's life fundamentally, that you'll end up like Jacob, you end up limping. Okay, we all have the fantasy of unlimited potential, and most of us at best limp to the finish line, or limp and don't make the finish line. And Carl reacted by saying, well, that's kind of a fine, philosophy for people who are, grumpy and miserable. Those are not Carl's words. I'm translating them to my words. But for people who are reasonably satisfied with their reasonably successful lives, this is a terrible approach. So I actually thought about that afterwards, Carl, and I want to react to it. And I want to say, I think maybe I'd argue the opposite. For the people who are already feeling bad, life is not successful, I'm not a success. I'm just thinking as a psychiatrist of my patients who are depressed. Then that is a terrible thing to dwell in, because then if you dwell in Rav Soloveitchik's view, then I say, well, I might as well just, heaven forfend, God forbid, end it all. What's the point, right? Those are the people who actually need some buoying up or support, more optimism. And it's the people who are, I think Rav Soleveitchik would say, the people who are reasonably happy, satisfied, feel reasonably successful. They're the ones who actually need to dig deeper and understand what the human condition really is as an antidote to their self-satisfied, their superficial self-satisfaction. Carl, I may be catching you off guard. Rebuttal?
Sure. I agree with some of what you're saying, that the overly satisfied among us need occasional bubble pricking to remind us to think more deeply. Those who are depressed need buoying up at times, but I think it's another matter or another level to say to those who are, the unavoidable integral part of the human condition is being flawed and prone to sin and bad behavior, and you should dwell on that every day. Let that be an important factor in your life or consideration in your consciousness on an ongoing basis.
Got it. Okay.
I want to be depressing to the well-adjusted.
Yes, I want to make one correction to what you said, and then I will say, let's let the disagreement hang, as they say in the Gemara, teku, which means we cannot solve this disagreement. Let's let it stand.
Okay.
But you said sin and there's another word.
Bad behavior.
Bad behavior. And he's not talking, I want to be clear, he's not talking about that. Not talking about the fundamental human experience is sin. There are other people who talk about that. He's talking about failure, the limp, Jacob's limp, right? Meaning flaw, not necessarily sin, meaning doing badly, but that you were not whole, WHOLE. None of us gets out alive, metaphorically and literally. Okay, let's let the disagreement stand. And let's go on. I think it's actually a useful disagreement. And I could say, and I'm not interested in saying, well, let's vote on it, or I don't know. I think I'm not even interested in asking, what do other people think? I think the disagreement is clear. Let's let it hang. Let's let it stand. Okay. So I want to move on with Rav Soleveitchik, the Rav, and he now talks about the ideas or the human impulse, let's call it, behind the first and third section of the Amidah, which he touched on briefly, which he's now going to talk about more fully. We'll look at it today. And by the way, in his book, this is a series of collected essays. A lot of his collected essays, it's never clear to me, did he collect them? Did a student collect them? It's interesting. In this book, the chapter that comes first is what we've done already, the middle of the Amida, Sarah, suffering. Then afterwards, he talks about the first and third part of the Amida. In this chapter, however, he doesn't talk about it that much in terms of the Amida. He talks about it in terms of Psalms. He looks in particular at Psalm 103 and 104. Psalm 104, familiar to us because it's the Psalm we add on Rosh Chodesh. And when I reread this chapter last night to prepare for today, I said to myself, shoot, I davened on my own on Rosh Chodesh, which was Friday, and I forgot to say Psalm 104. How'd I do that? Okay. And these are Psalms that talk about the majesty of God. So his concept, just to give you the bottom line, at the headline, the conclusion at the beginning, is section 1 of the Amida is about, he uses, I don't know why, maybe because he has his PhD in philosophy, he uses Latin terms, okay? He calls it majestas Dei, which means the majesty of God, which he maps onto the Hebrew term kivod Hashem, the glory of God. And thanksgiving, the third section of the Amidah, he calls that, he links that to the term caritas Dei, caritas meaning caring or charity or kindness, which he calls chesed Hashem. Okay? So he basically says the first part of the Amidah is about kivod Hashem, and the third part of the Amidah is about chesed Hashem. Okay? So let's take a look and see how he spells that out and unpacks that. Hold on. Share the screen. And for those who read through the whole chapter at home, for those who, go away. Okay. For those who read this whole chapter at home, you will see that most of what he talks about in the chapter is not the Amidah, but rather Psalm 103 and 104. But he sees that as kind of representative of the impulse in the first and the third part of the Amidah. Okay? Edited by Shlomo Carnby, which means Rav Soleveitchik was not the one who put these essays together in order. It's someone else. Okay. So we're jumping in the middle of a chapter. And just to backtrack for you, he talks about their various ways of apprehending God, coming to an awareness of God. He talks about intellect, which is the Rambam's way, right? I think about how's the universe created and what's all behind it and da-da-da. And intellectually, I come to a conclusion of there must be a God. That's intellect. Second approach is what he calls moral imperative, meaning, I can't imagine that all of life is random and, there's good and evil never gets punished and et cetera, et cetera. There must be a moral principle behind it all. In the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the moral arc of the universe is long, but it tends towards justice, which apparently he mostly cribbed from some 19th century preacher. I've read that. So two ways of saying, there must be a God in the universe are the intellectual path and the moral path, which he talks about earlier in the chapter or in a previous chapter. We're not going to read that. If you're interested in it, you can get his book. There's nothing, part of why I didn't bring it is there's nothing particularly new in it that we haven't studied together. Okay? And now he talks about ta'amu ur'u, which is in a verse in Psalms, which we say in the Shabbat morning Psuke de Zimra. Literally, he translates it as literally as taste and see God. And he calls this aesthetic or sensuous. And what he really means by this, again, I want to take it to the bottom line because reading through it is slow and dense. Reading through it, what he really means is look at the beauty of the world. Okay? So it can boil down to two things, which he's going to cite. So one of the things is the beauty of the world as noted in Psalms. Just think of Psalm 104, which we say every Rosh Chodesh, right? You just look at all the amazing things in the world and the biology of how it fits together. And I have no doubt that if the psalmist were alive today, the psalmist would be writing about, chemistry and physics and subatomic particles and stuff like that. Okay. But the psalmist was not aware of that. So the psalmist just said, look at the world around you. Some of the animals come out at night to get their food, and some come out during the day to get their food, and they each have their own food, and there's fish in the sea and birds in the air and creatures on the earth, and there's humanity, and what a wonderful world, in the words of the Louis Armstrong song. Okay? So that's one place where we found it, we've seen it already. And he also cites a second place, which is Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs, which he talks about as the very physical and metaphoric for the very physical and sensual love of God. Okay? All right. Here we go. Middle of the first page, page 58. Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi in the Kuzari, medieval work he's citing, okay, speaks of perceiving God. All right, back. In the passage from Kuzari already cited in the first chapter, Halevi formulates a remarkable theory of religious sensuousness. By the way, Rav Soloveitchik uses a lot of quasi-sexual terms in talking about this. A little bit shocking. Sensuousness. The Kuzari speaks of perceiving God, right? Ta'amu ur'u, taste and see, as a way of perceiving God. Only such a full sensuous experience of God gratifies the God-thirsty soul and arouses passion and ecstatic love in humanity in the person for the living God, for whom one is willing to incur martyrdom. That's how much you love God when you look at the beauty of the world. Abstract experience does not inspire the person. He's talking about Rambam here. Just thinking about it, that doesn't inspire you. It inspired Rambam, right? But he's saying that's not going to inspire most people. It is in the aesthesis, a noun from aesthetic, in the immediate beholding and perceiving of God that a voice is heard, quoting Sefer Dvarim, Deuteronomy, and God's voice you heard from within the fire, meaning there's an actual physical experience. God's glory and greatness, Hod Vehadar, you have seen with the naked eye. God's presence is sensed and felt with all its overpowering might. God's splendor and beauty, that's Hod Vehadar, fascinates the sensuous human, by which he means the aesthetically sensing, feeling human. One does not only think of God, that's the intellectual God, or comply with God's will, that's the moral God. One feels the touch of God's hand and the warmth that God's eyes radiate. Ta'amu ur'u ki tov Hashem, right, from Psalms. Taste and see that Hashem is good. In other words, experience God not through your facilities of abstract conceptualization, which dismiss the immediate reality, but by tasting God, as it were, Hebrew kiviyachol, meaning we know that physically we can't do that. We're using a metaphor. Tasting God, as it were, by feeling God right here and right now. In the cognitive and ethical act, we talked about intellectual and moral, one approaches God by the process of deduction. There is no direct apprehension of the Creator. One arrives at the conclusion of governing cosmic intelligence by studying the universal drama and by reaching the fringes, blah, 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 blah. Meaning, it's intellectual or moral is a conclusion that you get by thinking. It's not by experiencing. Okay. If we speak of experiencing God, the highlighted paragraph on the next page, and if by this we understand the ecstatic encounter of a person quivering with passion and tenseness, wow, then one cannot consider the ethical or intellectual act as capable of engendering such an experience. For the ethical and the cognitive, the rendezvous with the Creator is a quiet, sedate one. There is, in fact, no actual meeting. A real encounter is never achieved by the scientist or the ethicist. I don't think he means by that person. He means by a person implying just the cognitive approach or the ethical approach. A real encounter is never achieved. Okay. Only the next paragraph, only the aesthetic experience, if linked with the idea of the exalted, that's very key, meaning you see the beauty in the world. If you say, oh, it really just is from subatomic particles, it's from the rules of physics, okay, then you're not going to have an apprehension of God. But if you link it with the idea of the exalted, may only this, the aesthetic experience, may bring the human directly into contact with God, living, personal, and intimate. Only through coming in contact with the beautiful and exalted may one apprehend God instead of comprehending him. What that means. Feel the embrace of the Creator and the warm breath of infinity hovering over a finite creation. The reason for immediacy and impact implicit in the aesthetic experience is its sensuous character. This direct revelation of the character has always been explained by Judaism as a result of Kivod Elohim, the glory of God, Yeshayahu, Milo Kol Haaretz Kivodo, right? Kadosh, 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 the whole world is filled with God's kavod. Majestas Dei, this highlighted on the next page, conveys the thought that absolute beauty rests in God, that only God is the fountainhead out of which pulchritude, fancy word for beauty, grace, and loveliness flow into the world. The world abounds in magnificent forms, in harmony, style, and charm, because it was created in the likeness of its master, whose resplendent majesty and transcendent grace penetrate into every ramification of reality to the point of saturation. You look at nature and you say, that's beautiful. That's because God is beautiful. You look at physics and say, that's beautiful. By the way, mathematicians are mathematicians who do this too. They say numbers. It's beautiful, right? You look at that, it's because God is beautiful. Everything is created by God, and that beauty is a reflection of the beauty of the Creator, or kavod Hashem, the majesty of Hashem. You are robed in hod vehadar. Here's a quote from Psalms 8. When I see your heavens, the work of your fingers, moon and stars that fashion, then I say, Psalm 104, which we just said on Rosh Chodesh, Ma rabu ma'asecha Hashem, hulam b'chochma asita. How manifold are your creatures, O God. You have made them all with wisdom. And again, the psalmist is talking about animals. I have no doubt that a botanist would say plants, and a physicist would say subatomic particles or something like that. Okay, I think we get it. So I want to kind of skip Majestas Dei, end of this page, end of page 60. Divine beauty and glory captivate finite creation. That means us. We find it captivating. And the longing, the craving for the exalted, sublime, and the beautiful is ipso facto, in and of itself, a longing for God. Beauty as a motif in our lives must not be identified with the elusive passing, but with the eternal and absolute. You hear a beautiful piece of music, you shouldn't be feeling, okay, someone put some sounds together, it comes and goes. You should be feeling, this is my gateway. This is beautiful. It is my personal gateway to the eternal and absolute. Religious passion, ecstatic love, and intoxication with God stem from aesthetic awareness. Only beauty can be desired passionately. Only loveliness can arouse enthusiasm and frenzy. And only the aesthetic experience may turn into an intoxicating drink, into a madness. It's Dionysian, not Apollonian, for those who recognize those terms. Hence, Judaism has so glowingly spoken of the beloved Dode. Dode means lover in this context, from Shir HaShirim, Song of Songs. The Dode, who, by the way, and taken into the prayer on Friday night, L'cha Dodi, which is a poem from the 16th century describing the love between God and Israel, passion between God and Israel. Hence, Judaism has so glowingly spoken of the beloved lover, Dode, who is not only full of grace, but also graceful and fair, who is loved and desired, for whose embrace creation, like a young bride, including us, craves, and in whom it wants to rejoice. Is not Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, the great song of love, bordering on madness? For the beloved friend and bridegroom who is fair and ruddy, for whom the maidens feel passion and indomitable desire. Okay, this harks back to, I think we might not have talked about it in this class, but one of the medieval Jewish interpretations of the metaphor of Song of Songs, of the bride and the groom, the young maiden and the young man, is that it's about the soul's, S-O-U-L, the soul's longing for God. God is the lover, the individual soul is the woman who's seeking him and craving him and says, you're beautiful. He'll, by the way, this is kind of important. Beginning of the next paragraph. It is not a coincidence that Judaism, in describing the relationship between humanity and God, has taken advantage of a very rich reservoir of sexual symbolism, similes, and metaphors. The erotic love fans out in all directions, reaching infinity itself, which means, by the way, I just want to translate that. It means not only looking at a beautiful flower is a vehicle to apprehend God, or listening to a beautiful piece of music, or contemplating numbers if you're a mathematician, but passionate love and sex is also a signpost to God. That's why that metaphor is used in Shir HaShirim. Judaism did not discriminate between eros, worldly love, and agape, purely spiritual love, as the Christian mystics did. But rather, Judaism set up as a model of love of God the unredeemed passion, meaning you never fully get there, which is kind of what Shir HaShirim is about. Not the spiritual sublimated adoration, right? So in early Christianity, which thinks in Greek, because that's what they spoke, they talk about agape, which is purely spiritual love of God, as opposed to eros, which is physical love, and agape is better than eros, which is why the best way to get close to God in early Christianity is to become what? A monk or a nun, to forswear pleasures of the flesh, to dwell purely in agape, not in eros. Okay? I've forsworn eros, worldly love, for agape, pure spiritual love, and that will help bring me closer to God. That is the Christian ideal. It makes monasticism as the ideal. And he is saying, no. Judaism, by the way, I'm listening to a course on the Kabbalah with Rabbi Art Green, and he says the two world religions, I'm not sure he studied every single, but of the biggies, the things we call world religions, the two world religions that don't have monks and nuns are Judaism and Islam. Those are the two religions that do not believe in making a wall between agape and eros. Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, they have people who get closer to God by forswearing pleasures of the flesh. You just walk around, you don't even own property, you walk around with your begging bowl for people to give you food, okay? It's a very you want to get closer to God by having an unearthly life, as unearthly a life as possible. Jews don't distinguish. And that's why he says we have a text like Shir HaShirim, right? Because the unbridled passion of human sexual falling in love, passionate love, is a signpost to God, as well as, the symphony and the perfection of numbers and the flowers and the birds. They're all signposts to Majestas Dei. We're going to have to stop soon because I do want to allow for some discussion. So I don't think we're going to get to the third part of the Amida. I want to see if I want to do anything today. Okay. This paragraph with an asterisk on page 63, page 7 of the handout. But we draw the line. Religious sensibility may manifest itself not in bold pictorial representation. So we don't draw pictures of, God who's blue and has an elephant trunk and has 6 or 8 arms like they do in Hinduism, right? There's a line that we draw about the beauty thing, but rather we experience it in experiential immediacy. Contact is established with the Almighty in the abyss of a warm heart, in a lovesick soul, in the experience of the invisible. This is what makes it Jewish, invisible. In the richness of the inner life, in being aware of something supernal, great, awesome, and beautiful, which I think is sort of meant to be a vague translation, Gadol Gibor Vinorah, in the Amida. Although this something is not physically actually seen nor heard. However devoid of sensuous material this feeling is, it is still an immediate reality whose impact upon the religious person is enormous. In a word, the aesthetic experience of God, whether constructed of impressions or sensations drawn from our daily life, which means you saw the sun rise, you went on a hike in nature, or you saw a baby being born, or you saw a person die. He mentions death also. Okay? So whether you get this from day-to-day life, where man is engrossed in images and psychophysical sensuous processes, or consisting of ecstatic emotions, or whether you get it from moments of passion, whether you get it from a walk looking at the rose bushes in the neighborhood, okay, or whether you get it from falling in love, either way, okay, in the throbbing of the heart, the longing of the soul, it is the basis of the community of God and humanity. Okay, so I'm going to unshare. Okay, what this means, I'm going to stop sharing and say what this means, because he talks about this elsewhere, is that when you say, El Hagadol Hagibor V'Hanora El Elyon, majestic, incredible, powerful, God, highest God, right, who does all of these things, right, Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol, you're the creator of everything, and yet also individual acts of kindness, right? You're, which boils down to, you made the Big Bang, and I find you in every vein, on every leaf, on every tree. Okay? That's further explicated. Who recognized that first? According to the first blessing of the Amida, our ancestors who we're reading about now in Parshat Breshit. Abraham and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, Yaakov, Rachel and Leah. They all had ways of apprehending God in the world, right? Whether it's a nice little midrash about Abraham, smashing the idols and putting the mallet, the hammer in the hand of the biggest idol. That's a nice, midrashic way of talking about it, or saying, the midrash, we've heard rabbis like talking this midrash all the time. The palace, he passed by the palace is on fire, and he thought to himself, there must be an owner of the palace, right? It's like Moshe, looking at the burning bush, but the bush is not, what is this? What is this? Something in the world that makes you say, wait, what is this? Okay? Or if you're a mathematician, why do these numbers fit together in a particular way? Okay. And further amplified in the second bracha of the Amida, life and death, the rain. I have to tell you, all right? You're right, you give life, you bring death, you bring the rain, you bring the wind. It's amazing. Everything out there, when we contemplate it, it's the sensuous, real physical world. It is amazing. He says that is the signpost, the marker, symbol of Majestas Dei, the majesty of God. It's Kavod Hashem, which we then talk about explicitly when we're together in a minyan in the third paragraph of the Amidah, right? Milo Chola Aretz Kivodo. When we're not together in a minyan, and, according to rabbinic Judaism, it was unsafe to, have too many to reenact the mystical experience of Isaiah and Ezekiel. Remember, we talked about that. That's where the Kivadusha comes from. Then we say a kind of a safer version. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh ukdoshim b'chol yom yahalalu chasela. You are, now I'm going to translate kadosh as the word he used, the fancy religious studies word, numinous, meaning that which can only be sensed and is beyond all sense experience. I'm going to say that again. That which can only be sensed, but is beyond all sense experience. This morning, that's my translation for kadosh. Ata kadosh, v'shimcha, you are numinous, your name, some abstract quality that emanates from you, it's not your picture, not your statue. This is like Deuteronomy, right? All we have of God is God's name, right? Some abstract footprint left in the world that we think we perceive. So you are kadosh, and your name is kadosh, and therefore, every day, all the kadoshim praise you, which we've said in the past is the kadoshim it's two levels. The kadoshim is the angels, right? Because we're in the kadoshim, we're imitating the angels, but we want to be like the angels. So we're the kadoshim, the people who say, I want to put it together with Soleveitchik. The people who say, Ta'amu ur'u kitov Hashem, taste and see and experience God, those are the Kedoshim. We want to be linked to the El HaKadosh. HaKadosh, Ukdoshim b'chol yom yilu hasela, Sephardim add, Ki El Melech Gadol the Kadosh Ata, because you are the Kadosh sovereign and God. Baruch Ata Hashem, HaEl HaKadosh, the deity who is numinous. So today I'm going to translate HaEl HaKadosh as the deity who is numinous, the deity who can only be sensed, and again, bring it to Majestas Dei, the deity itself, himself, their self, themself, God's self, can only be sensed, but is beyond all sensation, and yet our sensation is the signpost to experiencing that divinity. Okay? Falling in love, sex, all the veins in every leaf of every tree, the way the baby mostly fits through a birth canal, someone giving their last breath and their soul being released from their body, the Fibonacci sequence, subatomic particles, all of it. It's all part of Kivod Hashem, Majestas Dei. That's what the first part of the Amida is about. Or Psalm 104, or lots of other things we read. Remember, we had a unit where we talked about the poetry in the Psalms. We had this 2 years ago. The poetry in the Psalms as pointing to God through the majesty and beauty of nature. Okay, which, by the way, he does mention death. Right, the majesty and beauty of nature isn't always, although it's beautiful, it's not always pretty. You know, a snake swallows a hamster whole, right? It doesn't look pretty to our eye from our limited standpoint. It is actually, in fact, though, if you step back from it, part of the beauty of the arrangement of the universe. And he mentions in there, we didn't see it, but we might see it in there. He mentions death as part of that too, right? We live and we die. Right, we're here for a finite time. We're a package of stuff that enables us to do all the stuff that we do, and then the package unbundles, and that's kind of the nature of our human finite existence. That's part of Kivod Hashem also. Melo chol haaretz kivodo. Although at moments for us as finite individuals, exquisitely painful. Right? He's not a Buddhist who says, no, suffering is an illusion. It's your illusion and get over it, right? He would certainly not say that. He would certainly say, oh, that's the middle part of the Amida. That too, okay? By the way, once we get to the third part, we might contemplate, so why are they in that order, okay? Because, I don't know, wouldn't you like to end on a high with the majesty of creation? But that's not how the Amida ends, but we'll talk about it. Okay, pause, couple of minutes, 2, 3, 4 minutes. Question, comment, thought, anything. Carl, go, unmute.
Well, first I want to thank you for your continuous but especially poignant today translation and explication of some of our well-known phrases in Judaism. It really helps bring more layers of meaning to them for me.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome.
So I like this part of his philosophy because it works, it resonates for me. I get a lot of mileage out of appreciating the wonder of nature and these other fine things.
Yeah.
My only comeback would be he's rather glib or quick to discount the intellectual and the moral paths to God.
Right.
And some of those people get pretty ecstatic too.
Correct. By the way, he talks about it at length in a section that we didn't read. So he does talk about it at length, but he gives it time, but you're right, he does say, but that doesn't get it for most people. I think he is reacting.
Most people, right.
And remember, Rambam, in his Guide for the Perplexed, which explains the whole Rambam's philosophy, has an introduction where he says, I am writing this for my one student who sent me a question. These are issues and explanations that are not for most people. They're not interested. They don't get it. They should. He would say. By the way, Rambam doesn't say they should have the centrist path. Rambam would say they should just daven and keep Shabbos. Don't worry your pretty little head about it. I didn't mean to make that sexist by saying it that way. Although Rambam would probably say it that way. Might agree with that, right? He's saying regular people. You're my deep philosophy student. You've sent me a deep question. I'm going to write you a whole philosophic treatise for you, and by extension, the very few people who are on your level, right? By the way, I don't know. And you'd say the same thing about, I don't know, I might say the same thing about, I am reading a book because of having to do with Kabbalah and physics and subatomic particles. And once I got to like protons and neutrons are made of quarks and they're held together by gluons and it's like, there's a point where I said, like, he lost me. I'm going to skim the rest of this chapter. Like, I just don't get it. My intellectual / scientific apparatus is just not on a sophisticated enough level to get it. And I would say that about mathematics and about chess also. Okay. And some people hear a symphony and they say, classical music, it helps me go to sleep, and other people say, wow, So different roads for different people. And you are correct, Carl. He is emphasizing here immediate sensory, the road of immediate sensory experience, by which he doesn't necessarily mean just sex. He means like, smell the flowers, hear the symphony, look at the whatever. Yes. And thus he says, intellectual, moral, that won't work for most people. He would say that's why Shir HaShirim, the poem about the soul's longing for God, picks as the core human experience, not the philosopher or the physics student or the classical music composer, but rather the lover, because that's the most direct and intense access we have to that kind of experience. Or that's a theory behind why Shir HaShirim is sacred, right? They wanted to kick Shir HaShirim out of the canon, the discussion of in the Talmud, and Rabbi Akiva says, no, the whole Torah is Kodesh. By the way, back to numinous, Kodesh. The whole Torah is Kodesh. Shir HaShirim is Kodesh Kodeshim, the holiest part of the Torah. All right, other thoughts, comments? You don't have to. It's 8:58. We can stop. All right. Here endeth the lesson for today. God willing, we will continue next week. Everyone have a meaningful day. By the way, sometimes things line up with the calendar. So, try to add into your own personal Thanksgiving on our American Thanksgiving holiday, if you're in America, a little bit of not just, the immediate stuff you have, if you have a roof over your head and food on the table, hopefully, but some of be grateful for Majestas Dei, Kivod Hashem, which we are privileged to apprehend in the world if we can slow down enough and stop looking at our phone screens so that we can actually go and smell it and taste it and see it. See you next week.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.